Yo, what's up guys? Very different video today than normally. And in the title you already see it, and no, it is not a clickbait. We as a few content creators of us, but also SWC players, were invited to Berlin to talk to Korean developers. So in this case, we were actually talking to the developers, as someone would say, where we were talking to the big potatoes. We were not talking to the small potatoes, we were talking to people that were like development lead, project leads, head of the business, like all of these kind of departments that actually do matter. And then also like the big potatoes of those departments. So that was definitely an interesting one. And that was mainly talking about current state of the game. What are things that we suggest? What are their plans on things? And we were allowed to ask them questions. So this was spread out into 3 or 4 days. And within those days, every day had like, I think 4 to 6 people from the community in there. And we were able to ask the question. So personally, I was in the second day. I'm not going to be saying like, oh, this person was in, that person was in. Like people are free to say whether they were in and in which day they were and that kind of stuff. If they do want to talk about it, don't want to talk about it. I don't want to be pointing fingers like, oh, he was in, and then everyone starts bombarding that person with questions and stuff. I will try to keep this video as covering the whole thing from all of the days, but I will be mainly focusing on the day that I was in at first. But a lot of the days, from what I see from the notes, has like overlapping topics. So it is RTA, it is R5, it is Siege. Like I can already spoil those kind of things. Yeah, I'm just going to go over all of those topics, what was said. It is still a bunch of stuff is under NDA, so I can't really say everything. But I do have like notes of what I can and can't say, so I will keep a hold on those. Besides that, I do really want to thank Comto, especially Comto's HQ, also for coming over, because they came over from Korea HQ to Berlin. They had like 4 days of like, pretty much our session was like 10 hours, legit, no joke. 10 hours of just non-stop blah, blah, blah about the game, about what things to do, what things not to do. So they had really long days there, and they actually were really enthusiastic about it, but also very involved about it. So it's definitely where you could see that they do care about the game. No, I'm not paid to say this. Like before, people was like, see, you're Kanto's employee, you're paid to say this. No, I'm not paid to say this shit. I'm not even paid to make this video or anything. This is because I have a certain love for this game, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this as full-time content creation for I don't know how long already, because I'm definitely one of those people, if I wouldn't enjoy it altogether, I wouldn't do it. And therefore, it's really cool for me to see that it does get rewarded in a certain way, that they're like, okay, we also care. We want to go to Europe. We want to talk to you guys. We want to listen to your guys' questions, concerns, and feedback. Then it doesn't mean in the end that everything that I suggest or someone else suggests is going to be implemented. No, totally not. It's more of an exchange of like ideas. It's more of an exchange of suggestions. It's seeing their side of the coin pretty much, because it's really easy to go on either my channel or someone else's channel or read on Reddit and then read what the community says. But for Comto, especially Comto's HQ in Korea, they have been kind of on the background, kind of not showing too many things. And that was really the thing that I was very thankful for on this talk. It was very transparent. At some points, they just also said like, yeah, to be honest, we just did that wrong. I'm like, whoa, damn. That especially from like, I know myself for like Asian countries, mainly in China, and they always have the culture of like, you don't want to say you did something wrong because that is like a loss of face, as they would call it. And for them to say it and just be like, there's like, wow, okay, yeah, we did certain things wrong, but we want to fix things. I'm like, whoa, wait, this is good. So with this video, am I going to bring the hype like, yo, everything is fixed, everything is fine, everything is going to be like super chill and stuff? Not necessarily. I don't want to bring that up that much of hype. I want to bring up a hype that's fair. I want to bring up a hype that's transparent. And the main thing that I'm very hyped for is that they came here and they listened to things. And I think that's a really good step in the right direction, where people have faith in the company and the game, where they feel like, okay, it's going in a direction that I might actually enjoy. And that is also what I try to bring with this video. But I'm also not going to be overselling things and things that everything is going to be like insane. Everyone's going to get their LD5. Everyone is like rainbow and sunshine and blah, 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 that kind of stuff. No. The thing is, which is also something that you have to keep in mind, they care about the longevity of the game. And there are a few things that we might really dislike in this game, which does help the longevity of the game. For example, not everyone having every unit helps the longevity of the game, because pulling something does actually fucking mean something. You actually get happy if you get something cool. Whereas if everyone had everything, like what we see right now with the net fives, and this is not something that was really talked about in the talk itself, but that is just something from my understanding in the first place. Right now, if you pull a net 5, it's like, yeah, another one. Because most people have most net 5s. It's not that hard to get most net 5s. You have a bunch of scrolls where you have like, pull 10 net 5s that you don't have and choose one. Like that kind of stuff. Back in the days, if you had that back in the days, it would be like, yo, bro, I have like 1, 2, 3 normal net 5s. That would be insane. But right now, it's like everyone's kind of having most things. And like, yeah, it's not that special. Sure, the LD5s are kind of special, but that's the only thing that's special. Like, just me summoning like 4,000 mystical scrolls, no one really cares. Like, I'm not going to get anything new, because I have most things. But me summoning like 4,000 LD scrolls, yeah, then we're talking. But back in the days, 8 years back, summoning 4,000 mystical scrolls, like, yo, you're going to get your Molong and blah, 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 all of those kind of good things. And that's kind of where they don't want to power creep this game towards an extent that everyone gets everything. And you have to keep that in mind with some of the answers as well. They want to keep this game running as long as possible, because in the end, hey, this is their baby. This is the game that runs well. This is the game that has been running very well. And therefore, they also do want to put the effort, as that we have seen with the talk, of them coming to Berlin and talking about those things. So now, actually, I've been rambling on for a long time. This video is going to be pretty lengthy. Same as the talks that we had over there. Also, some of the things that we do have to keep in mind, they were speaking in, or like we were asking the questions in English. Then these questions were translated to Korean. Then the developers gave the answers in Korean, and then it had to be translated back to English. So that was also definitely a difficult job, which did take some time back and forth. Because in the end, they do speak a decent amount of English, but they are not comfortable on business level of English. And when the topics are sensitive, or the topics are more keen to be correct, that is where you want to speak your own language, rather than just kind of like freelance in whatever language you do know a little bit of. So for that reason, it did take a little bit of more time back and forth as well. So let's go into the topics. First of all, RTA. RTA Special League. And one of the concerns that was brought up is that RTA Special League, like the last one where we had the server only Special League, it was kind of boring. It was kind of bad. The design was just not really great, and they do acknowledge that it was kind of just something to try out. Like, they used the Special League of just trying out something and then see how that works. In this time, well, the server only one didn't really connect that well. Some people in the community did also suggest, what if you make a Special League where you have all units available for everyone? And I think that's interesting. Also, the developers were like, okay, that does sound pretty interesting, but they also right away came with a few follow-up questions on that. For example, how does that work? Do you also give people all of the runes? Or what if people have to, then for those 2 weeks, start to re-rune everything? Would they actually enjoy it? And also, my concern on top of that is, Summoners War has a certain charm by not having everything. If you give everything for free, as in a Special League, does that kind of kill the charm or not? So those are kind of discussions that we have back and forth. There's no conclusive answers to that of what they do or do not do. But it's definitely for Special League, they will be looking into more different kind of style of Special Leagues, where they can maybe add something else, maybe something we haven't seen altogether, maybe something that got the idea by the community at some point. But they're definitely looking into making Special League more interesting, because Special League is kind of the moment where they can somewhat try around and play around with. Another thing for the Special League is that, especially casual players, they don't want to be switching their runes on their whole rune box every time back and forth. And I do understand that as well. I think there's a lot of players, also even in the high end, they're like, oh, this Special League is like this and this. Don't care, I'm not going to be switching my runes, I'm just not going to play it all together. So they're definitely trying to find like a nice middle ground into having something new and refreshing, but also something that people don't have to build an insane effort to re-rune their whole box and that kind of stuff. So Special League is kind of a difficult thing for a little bit. We did actually give the suggestion of like, hey, Special League, it doesn't matter as much. Feel free to try something new. Feel free to just toy around, even if people play it less at that time. But feel more free to just flip the script, go something crazy. And they are definitely scared to do that from what I've seen in their reaction. They didn't necessarily say that, but from their reactions, like, I'm not too sure if we want to do that, but that is something that I feel personally. But then again, I think they kind of tried that with the server-specific a special league, and that kind of backfired because then we're always like, that's the thing. Like, it's always like, we want change. It's like, we change something. We don't like this change. That is the big issue for developers in general, right? Another topic for RTA was the 2v2s. And the 2v2s, people would say it's like there's a lack of rewards. There's a, at some point, the queues just get kind of long because people just play for the rewards and then they stop playing that. And their main answer was that they know that these are valid points. However, 2v2 was always been designed to be casual and fun. It was never really designed to be focused on ranks or focused on like ranking or anything like that. And the main thing is, the moment that you give more rewards to 2v2, people feel more bound to have to play 2v2. Currently, personally, myself, I don't like 2v2. There's a lot of people that do like 2v2. But for me, I don't like it because it just takes a lot of time with the drafting and that kind of stuff. The matches just take very long, and therefore, for me personally, it gets a little bit boring. But there's people that definitely do like it. But for that reason, I have to do 2v2. The moment that they bump up the rewards to a certain amount, I'm not going to miss out on those rewards because I do everything that's free to play in the game. And I get all of the free to play rewards in the game. But therefore, I have to feel the need that I have to play 2v2 as well. Whereas they kind of want to keep it fun and casual, and also be able to pretty much like completely queue with someone that's way outside of your rank. Let's say that someone is like G3, you could still fight together with a friend that's Fighter 3, and then queue up somewhere in the middle at some point. So they just want to keep it casual and fun, and that is the main reason why they don't actually do it for more rewards or more things like that. Also, for the 2v2, it does not mean that they keep it casual and therefore they're not going to do any development on it. It could be in the future that they're still going to pick up development on it. But for now, it's just bug fixes and more looking at reworking old content and improving other aspects of the game rather than focusing on 2v2. They did also mention for 2v2, what if 2v2 gets a specific box of rune sets and you can actually rune your units different on that? Once again, adds a little bit more difficulty to the game. Plus, that's also something that I mentioned. Let's say that you have always 2v2 open and always normal RTA open. And people can't play the same thing at the same time. So for that reason, people play A or B. And in A or B both, you're going to have longer matchmaking and kind of thing. So that is something that they do have to keep in mind during like their changes to 2v2. So once again, for 2v2, it's just more of a casual thing, more of a fun thing. They open it from time to time. And therefore, it's also not open all the time, I think. Then for a few things that they're going to be doing in 2025. So as they already mentioned in the developer preview, there are going to be siege changes. So those are the siege changes that they did already mention in there. They're looking at changing the map. So hopefully for the better. We haven't seen anything that is really like specific, like, oh, this is what the map is going to look like or something like that. We don't know that. But they are working on that. Also, what they're working on is the 11th anniversary for the celebration, which is coming pretty soon as well. So they're definitely working on those. And my people ask is like, okay, are they going to add new content? And the answer is no. They're rather going to focus on rebalance and change current content rather than adding immediate new content. It still could be that there is going to be new content, but they rather focus on what's already there and making that better. And the big thing with that is my answer rather than their answer on this. It is very hard to please everyone in this game. Because for me personally, as a content creator and playing all content in the game, I would like to see new content. But the moment that there's new content, like such as artifacts back in the day, artifacts is actually a thing that made a lot of people feel that the game became too complicated. There's still a lot of people that just don't want to farm artifacts. They just want to farm their speed quads and then call it a day. Like, that's the only thing that they're aiming for. They don't want to think about, like, oh, different lines of artifacts, crit damage max, blah, blah, blah. What the hell is even this? So they don't want to overcomplicate this game and also make it that you have to farm too many things. Because let's say they add in a dungeon for a 7th rune. And this is just me talking. This is not the devs talking right now. But let's say that add in a dungeon for a 7th rune. And at that moment, people also have to farm that 7th rune. And then you also have to farm your normal runes. And then you also have to farm grinds and gems. And then you also have to farm your artifacts and everything. It just gets a little bit too much. And people feel like, oh, then I also have to farm that. And that's just adding more difficulty to the game, which also, in the end, like, sure, there's a big player base that wants to play very tryhard, but there's an even bigger player base that's also just a casual player. And they want to make the game great for all of those people. And for that reason, they rather go for rebalancing current content than adding new content, which I think is a good thing because it's very hard to please both the try-hard gamers and the very casual gamers by adding new content, because most of the new added content, a lot of the casual gamers would say like, man, not for me. So that is definitely a thing that I do agree on. They also want to be focusing in 2025 on balance patches, which is a really good one right there. And they are saying they want to speed up the balance patches phases, and they will also try to be more transparent with the balance patches. However, if that's exactly going to mean that they're going to be writing down what a change would mean or not, that was kind of in my talks was kind of left in the middle. The big issue with that is, like, let's say that some other big games like in League of Legends, in TFT specific, I would say that they write down like, okay, we have a change to this unit and because of this and this reason. They could do that, but from what I've heard in my talk is that the people that could actually write those things have to have a very good understanding of what is happening in the game, and they rather put those people on doing things as actually improving the balancing, checking units and that kind of stuff, testing units, rather than them also having to write stuff. It is an answer. Is that what a lot of people would agree or disagree with? I can kind of get the idea. Then again, you might also give the counter arguments like, okay, it's just like writing one sentence, shouldn't be that hard. But the thing is, they also have to distribute this game in multiple languages, and therefore you have to distribute that in multiple languages. And even what we see right now with just the skills description, it is sometimes already kind of ambiguous, where you're like, okay, what is this actually going to do? Or does it even make sense in like a certain language or anything like that? So if you have to also focus on that on top of the balance patch itself, it might be a little bit more difficult, because you have to let this be done by people that actually understand the game. Because we have had it in the past sometimes that someone asks something at support, and that support is not always the person working there. And once again, this is not come to a saying, this is just from like the support thing is from what I've seen in the past. Support says like, oh, it's like this and this, and they're like, yeah, that's actually not how it works. So that is the thing. The people that are best to reply to very technical questions on support, or the best one that are actually the ones that can write a balance patch notes of saying like what unit does what and why, are the people that are so valuable that you rather want to put them on a different position to do something actual very valuable. And I definitely, like, from a whole like company standpoint of view, I definitely get that idea. I do think that people still like to get a little bit more transparency, or like okay, these are the main lines of a balance patch. Like, for example, like, okay, we address this, this, and this for the current balance patch, and then those are takes, and you can see that represented in like a few units, and just gotta keep on farming to have something in the background over here. So yeah, that is something that they're going to be looking at for the balance patches. And they do also recognize that the few last balance patches they had were too minor. They did actually notice with all of the people replying to them that the balance patches, the one in November and the one in January, both of them were very lackluster. And they are saying that they're going to put more manpower towards the balance patches, and they're going to put more manpower also towards like just improving the game in general. Also, do keep in mind that it's not as simple as like, okay, we're going to just hire like 100 more people, like just calling out a number, for a balance patch improval, because you actually need the right people at the right position. And for balance patch specific, you need a lot of knowledge in this game to understand what to change, what not to change, how to change it, etc. And that is also the difficult thing with a game where not everyone has the same units, because you will add in a certain bias. So therefore, you need to have people that have a good understanding of the game, are as least biased as possible, and all of that kind of stuff. And it's not just about hiring like 100 new people, because that is pretty much like a manager thing saying of like, okay, 9 women can create a baby in 1 month, because if they all combine their strengths, it's 1 month, keep it done, keep it easy. That kind of shit. It's just not simply how it works in some kind of jobs. And I think balance patching is one of those. So definitely curious to see what they're going to be doing for the balance patch at the end of March, which is the one that's coming up soon. The thing is also with this, it doesn't necessarily mean that the first thing that comes up is going to be instantly like insane. Like the next balance patch, like, yo, this is the most crazy balance patch ever. It might take time for this talk to actually get back to Korea, for them to discuss things and blah, blah, that kind of stuff. But for the balance patch, I do have pretty high hopes for the one in March. And the main reason for that is because before we actually asked it, they already said it's like, we know. We know that the balance patches were pretty lackluster in the last few. Then also a few things for a balance patch specific, something that we addressed, such as Ian, the Light Ezio, also Light Steel Commander, has the awakening of resistance, which doesn't make sense with this whole kit. We did address that. And they actually had a very simple answer to that. Some of them are in there to not make sense, to not make a unit too strong. That is the most simple answer there is, and which does actually make sense. For example, if you look at the Draken Warrior Dark, the kit looks really strong, so they gave it a bad awakening. And that also gives them they didn't necessarily say this part though, but it gives them an easy chance for also changing the awakening to buff him in case that he is too weak, or something like that. So that is the main thing, that some of the awakenings are just on purpose not making sense, just to have a unit not be too strong on release, or for them to kind of like test around like, hey, is this good enough, is it not good enough? And then they have the chance always later for an Oberon, for example, that happened in the past, make the crit awakening in there. For Savannah currently, the accuracy awakening is in there. Whereas if Savannah had an accuracy awakening right from the get-go, she would have been way too OP, because Savannah was even meta back then without the accuracy awakening. So that's kind of the thing in there. I gave the suggestion on that because now it's like, to be honest, it looks kind of stupid. Like, it looks like, Come To Us doesn't play their game, they don't understand. My suggestion was, how about you remove the resistance awakening and just put Ian a awakening in his third skill and let it do exactly what it does right now, but then be like, yeah, it's because of the awakening in the skill 3. And then technically you take away 25 resistance. It's making the unit worse, but it's making the community more happy of being like, that makes sense. So that was just my suggestion on that. If they're actually going to do it, I don't know. But yeah, there are some of the decisions in designs which are just made there to not make something too strong. That is just the simple. However, they do also acknowledge that it is frustration to some players, and they will definitely look in like to see if they can get like a better balancing in that. But also there's no concrete answers of like, okay, this is what they're going to do with the balance patch. But for what they exactly said, but something they did said is that the team acknowledged the concerns of the working potential adjustments. So for example, leader skills, for example, awakenings. But they keep in mind like the balancing, fun, fairness, and also the strategic depth of the game. So they're definitely working towards a certain goal to keep it fun, to keep it fair, and to keep it interesting. So I'm definitely very curious to see what is going to be for the next balance patch. Another point for balancing is like, what do they look at during a process of balancing? So they're not just looking at win rates, they're not just looking at RTA, they're not just looking at siege. Some examples that they gave is like Teshar, Liam. Those are definitely units that do benefit from just dungeon clearing, and they do want to improve those, such as Brillia back in the days. So they do want to see. So they do actually look at the whole game, and they're not just looking at like, okay, what's the highest win rate unit right now? We're going to tune that down. What's the lowest win rate unit right now? We're going to tune that up. They definitely do try to look at the whole game as a whole, but they have seen the feeling of people just being the balance patches lackluster, and they do want to address that, and they do want to improve that. So once again, I'm very curious for end of the month of this balance patch. It might be too soon for them to make a lot of changes on it already, and might be that the one in 3 months is going to be a big change, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see at least a quite bit more this one. Also, someone did ask, is there a limit for how many units are addressed in the balance patch? And they actually said no, there's no limit to how many units they could address. They just do what they feel like at that moment is right. They have seen it. They actually do acknowledge that the last few were very lackluster, and they do know that the community isn't happy with that. So they're going to be changing what they're doing right now. They didn't say any specifics, but they did say like, hey, we want to do this differently because we do see that what we're currently doing with the balance patches isn't making people happy. And they do want to have like happy community and people enjoying the balance patches in general. They did also mention that they're focusing more on community feedback rather than they have done in the past, and that they're planning, as mentioned before, to recruit more people within their team to do the balance patch. And I'm not talking about recruiting content creators, I'm talking about them recruiting more people to actually focus on the balance patch within their internal teams. Would you ask me personally, and this is me talking, not the devs talking, would you say like involve content creators or SWC players in the balancing? I'm not sure how that conversation came up. I think it was during a break, and I did mention that before. Like I've seen like this Reddit post, see someone saying like, oh, they should hire like Obabo and Say and blah 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 for the balancing team. Um, I said there, hell no. Like that's the thing. Like no, I don't want to do that. And the main thing is, hey, I have a bias. If I fuck up something, people are going to be really fucking mad at me specific. And yeah, I've seen that before with, I think it was someone on Riot, and he went from like a community kind of guy towards the balancing team. The guy legitimately got like death threats and that kind of shit because he fucked up someone's unit, that kind of stuff. Like in the end, that's the thing which is really hard with balancing. It is impossible to please everyone. There's going to be a lot of units that are still shit. And you cannot address all of the shit units. Let's say that they're saying like, okay, all of the bad LDs, we make them good, then we get a full LD5 meta, and people are going to be like, yeah, now that's a full LD5 meta. It's like, yeah, you asked to have all LD5 buffs. So that is kind of the thing. And let's say that you would hella downtune an Oliver and a few other units. They probably create like something slips through the lines and becomes the new Oliver. You always have something like that. And in this game, people are invested in their units. You have to put the Devilmons in it. You have to actually summon a unit. You have to maybe go through your way to select the unit from like a selection scroll or anything like that for a normal net 5. And the next patch, they just chop that unit. Whereas in League, technically, you can start learning any of the new champions. In Summoners War, it's just a different game. You cannot really just hard cut some units. And they did also mention that they focus more on buffing units rather than nerfing units for that exact reason. Because nerfing units mostly makes people sad. However, if a nerf is really needed, they would still go for a nerf. But that's the thing. Buffing units in most cases make people happy. Nerfing units in most cases make people sad, which is very understandable. Also, they do mention that monster neglecting is not on purpose. Let's say a few units out there that haven't gotten any buffs in the recent time or a very long time. It's not that they go for a specific set of units like, hey, we're going to focus on these units, or hey, we're focusing on LD5s or focusing not on LD5s. They're trying to look at the whole global picture and then see what fits within that balance patch. So there's no specific targeting or specific deselected targeting or anything like that. And then some units just fell through the crack and never actually get a buff. For example, Beal's buff, I guess. But then it's just me pointing out one unit. It's not that they said like, hey, it happened to this unit or anything, and therefore it's going to get buffed in the next one. That's not what they said, but that is just me giving an example. But since they want to find like a faster pace of balancing, probably more units will get addressed that way. Another suggestion that was given on that day is just do the balance specs explanation in English, and then everyone can kind of speak English or just translate it themselves if they really want to. So they don't have to do it in all languages, which in my opinion is a cool idea, because in the end, in most regions, they speak English anyways. And otherwise, you will have someone translate it to like French or Korean or Japanese or Chinese or anything like that anyways. So I think that that would be a nice way, which also takes a little bit of work out of their hands. And then they can focus on writing the English balance patch really good. And all of the others, they can kind of like either not do or do sloppy or something like that. Personally, well, since I'm English speaking, I don't really mind about that. But that is something that was suggested. It's not necessarily something that they're going to do or not. Another suggestion was for the major balance patch at the start of the season, and then smaller balance patches throughout the mid-season, or just like throughout the season, some few smaller changes. But at the start of the season, do like a hard change right there. And the response that they give to that is that it's more than just RTA, because we have a Siege season running, we have RTA season running, we have SWC qualifiers, we have SWC regional cups, other coordinated events, and they want to have it fair across all of them, and they don't really want to say it's like, okay, RTA is the main thing, we're gonna balancing based on the season of RTA, or also like the changes that are not RTA focused, something like that. So it would be nice if they could actually follow like a seasonal system like some other games do. Like, for example, League of Legends. Based on the season, they do like a hard balancing, and then they go kind of on there from there. But the thing is, League of Legends only has one content or like one game mode that they fully have to balance towards. And all of the other game modes, they don't really have to care for balancing towards. Whereas Summoners War has to balance towards a lot more different kind of content in the game. And for that reason, it's just... it would be nice if they could, but it's definitely a more challenging thing to do, and therefore they can't really follow that ideology. And therefore, they can't really follow that system all too much. Also, was mentioned for balancing is that, for example, Amber was nerfed due to Veronica being OP. They definitely could kind of separate those units for doing things, but they also don't want to overcomplicate things. And they kind of have like it's somewhat set that units do have overlapping skill 2s, and therefore it kind of works that way. Sure, there are a few examples, such as the dragons, and also sometimes that an awakening goes into the skill rather than going into like a stat, and that changes it kind of. But for now, they don't really want to focus too much on separating and making exemptions. They kind of want to have like the general rule set of like, okay, if Unit A and Unit B have the same skill 2 and Unit B is too OP, then we down tune Unit B. You have seen it with Amber that they actually then buff the passive in response to not just nerfing a unit too hard. In the end, Amber is maybe a bad example because Amber is still really good. So, but that is definitely a thing that can be a thing that they want to look at. Like, okay, if we have to nerf a unit because of one of the family members being too OP and that unit has to be nerfed, then they're definitely trying to buff that unit in the same process, which they have been. And they try to not separate skills to all be completely different, whereas the skills may be the same name on the same thing. If it's really needed, they would still do it. But the current stance on it is that they will keep the system as is. As mentioned before, they will keep the units the same on the same skills in most cases. Otherwise, they're just adding more difficulties to the balance patch. And as we've all know, like balancing in general is just very difficult. For the balance patch, also in another day, it was mentioned like it's too hard to read a balance patch because they have like the what is and to be. And then it's like 6 lines of text and 6 lines of text. And the only thing that would change was like a 5 to a 10. And they did actually mention that they want to make it more clarified in like having certain key metrics like this changed, that changed, and having it like better. Then talking about Siege, and Siege was pointed out a few times, and I think Siege is also one of their biggest struggles. And this is once again the big difference between a hardcore player in a top 4 guild or top 20 guild versus someone that's just doing Siege in like G1 or P3 or just super casual with a bunch of friends. Like, how do you keep Siege interesting? And that is definitely a difficult thing for just satisfying all of the different regions also, because in Europe, we all have the pretty much same time zone, maybe +1, maybe -1, but it's not that bad. If you go to global, they're working with the LA time. But you have people who are living in New York as well. But you also have people living in Hawaii. But you also have people that are just on the global server that are in Europe or in Asia. So they definitely have a time zone issue. And for that reason, it's a little bit harder to say, for example, what they tried back in the days, like, oh, let's make a one-day siege. It becomes a little bit more difficult. Like for Europe, it's really good. For Asia server, maybe depending on where in Asia you have a few different time zones. But for a Japan or Korea server, it will be pretty simple because it's just that one server. But it's definitely a thing that they are trying to look at of like, okay, what can be better for Siege? So one of the suggestions that we gave during our day was to make the first turn of a skill of a unit always selectable and not only selectable during the tournaments. And they were actually like, okay, sounds good. That is definitely something that they were interested in. But they do also want to keep in mind that, especially in lower ranks, if people are losing too much, they don't really enjoy Siege too much. So they don't want to be making defense too strong. But then again, my counter argument is like, if the team doesn't derp, it's supposed to do that anyway. So it's like, does not really change that much, but that was my opinion on that. And I personally actually suggested even one step further. I want to have all 3 units selected on what they do on their first skill in the first rotation. But they were like, okay, that was also a thing that they said a lot in this talk. Let's do things step by step. Let's first add in one thing and then maybe the other thing. But first see like, okay, we added in a step. What will be the next thing that is going to happen? Because they were talking about like, okay, we see in like high-end guilds, guilds have like 95% win rate. I was like, 95? Origin is not hitting 97, Origin OP. I just wanted to call that out, was funny. But they were like, yeah, 97. What was actually 96.8? So it's 96. I'm like, no, 96.8. 96.8. But yeah, they were like, okay, we want to make changes to defense because in general, they did acknowledge that defense is too strong. Or defense is too weak and offense is too strong. They also said, is that maybe not a balancing issue rather than a siege issue? I'm like, could be, but I think that I gave the example of a Destiny just going for a bunch of times in a skill 1 on a kinky rather than skill 3 and one-shotting that kinky. Seen that offense hit before. I'm like, yeah, is that really a issue of the AI just derping, or yeah, that is, in my opinion, rather than the balancing of Destiny in the first place, unless you want to give it Oblivion skill 1. But yeah, okay, fair. But yeah, those are the things that they are going to be looking at. But they want to be looking at like minor changes first. They don't want to be changing defense to suddenly have like 20-30% extra win rate. No, they want to be looking at like where offense in the high-end guilds maybe loses like 3% more or like 2% more or something like that, and not suddenly drops 30% more. I gave the counter argument of saying, like, I'm pretty sure that if you give all 3 skills using the right skill right away, you're definitely not going to be dropping like 30% win rate. That would be then you're using very weird offenses. Because in the end, if your AI decides to do the right thing, you're not changing anything to the AI. You're actually just doing what it's supposed to do. And yeah, sure, you're gonna get some more wins because otherwise it would have derped and people win because your offense or your defense was derping. But it's definitely not something that should be losing a lot more in offense. But they definitely have something that that they want to look at, like, okay, small changes at a time of how to improve defenses. But then again, they also don't want to do it too much, because in lower ranks, in the end, people don't have like 90-95% win rate. I actually have no clue what's the win rate in a more casual siege environment. I guess like 7 or 8 out of 10 normally, but could be less than that as well. I'm not 100% sure about that. Well, then besides that, defense is being too weak and offense being too strong, 1v1v1 is a thing that is a topic that's often met up as well. And they actually gave an answer to that, which I feel is very fitting as well. Because a lot of people say, like, okay, the 2v1 is very unfair. And they actually made it to a point, and don't get me wrong on this, and listen to the whole context before you draw your conclusions. They said they were never actually fully focused on making a 1v1v1 super fair. And that is because it's very hard to make it fair, even if you do 1v1. Because you might say, it's like, yeah, 1v1 is always fair. Get this scenario. Let's say you're a rank 20 guild, and you have to play against the rank 18 guild, and you always lose against that guild. It's a guaranteed lose. Whereas in a 1v1v1, things are a little bit more unpredictable, more things can happen, and therefore you might actually take that victory, and there's a bit more strategy behind that. And is that more frustrating to a certain extent? Yes, but if you queue up against someone that you guarantee lose against, it is also frustrating. So it's a little bit difficult from both worlds to be saying, like, okay, what is the best answer to solving that? One of the solving things that they want to go for is adding more numbers of guilds towards the tournament, and therefore more guilds can get into the tournament, and then you do get your 1v1. So rather than the 1v1s that people would like to see at the end of the siege, the tournament is just a little bit extended, and within the tournament you have your extra 1v1 that you would normally have at the end of the siege. So in the end, the change is not exactly what the people were asking for, but the result, in my opinion, is pretty much the same. And then you might say, it's like, okay, now it's the issue of, like, are you a top 20 guild or a top 21 guild, and top 21 is out? Then it would, I think it's extended to like top 32, but don't add me on the numbers on that. I'm not 100% sure about that. But then you might be, it's like, yeah, oh, we just got kicked out of like top 32 because of blah, blah, blah. That you're always going to have an edge in that. That is just a simple thing that I would say is like, yeah, there's always like that. They do also mention that the map changes. They are looking into new map changes, as mentioned before. I do not know if new map changes, like, personally, I'm not a siege lead by the map. I haven't done that much at all. Like, I did that back in Doubt, but that is already like 2-3 years back. And also, I barely did it there. So I definitely can't be talking of like, yeah, I know how the map works and that kind of stuff. There's very smart people in Origin that do that shit, and I don't have to look at it. But there are certain maps that involve a lot more 2v1 focus than the other maps, such as the current map that we have. We have the Tower 4, the tower that's or is that Tower 4? I think it's Tower 4. The tower that's connected to you, that you only have to hit one tower and then you can immediately go for it, and it's the Nat 2 tower that's connected to the base. If you want a 2v4, you just go hard on that tower and you just like hit their whole backline, and you can really screw someone up, and you can really freeze their offenses for a long time, or freeze the towers for a long time. So they're definitely looking at a map where that is less possible. But then again, I haven't seen the exact implications of how that would look like. Also, I wouldn't be the best person to talk to if they want to actually get like feedback on a proper map. They shouldn't be talking to me. I would actually refer them to, I would say, pretty much the winners of the Siege tournament, because they have interviews with those kind of guys regardless. So, and they probably have a lot more understanding of the Siege map than I do. So I'm not gonna go too much into that. But they also didn't go into like exact like details of like how the map would look like. Someone also did suggest, what if you make the guilds anonymous towards the end of the siege? We were already joking. It's like you go into the chat and all of the names are anonymous, and it's like, who are you? You just type it in chat, just like, who this? And it's also like it's relatively easy to fight, so I don't think anonymous like siege hit at the end doesn't really change anything. Another thing that was mentioned for Siege is a separation of runes for Siege, and they did really like the idea. The only issue that they felt like was, for example, for World Guild Battle, they noticed in their data that a lot of, especially lower-end guilds, they didn't even notice that it was a difference between World Guild Battle runes and normal runes. And then normal runes we call like the PvE runes, Siege runes, Arena runes, that kind of stuff. Because World Guild Battle, defense only, has a separation of runes. And they noticed that not everyone really knows that it's going on. So what they would like to do for that is, before actually making a separation of runes, because I think for Siege separation of runes is definitely really nice. It would also be nice if it doesn't cost any mana, but we actually didn't talk about that. It's just something that comes to mind right now, because everyone is just back and forth switching on offenses all the time. Or maybe even that it's a way where it's locked in and you can switch. I don't know, that's just things that I'm thinking of right now. But yeah, the separation of runes is there, but they first want to be maybe looking at some kind of structure or design, which makes the game like give you a reminder of like, hey, your stuff is not ruined or something like that. Or, hey, there is a separation, it is not ruined, you get a pop-up, something like that. We were talking about that, but nothing is like specific set in stone for that topic altogether. But it's definitely, they found it a interesting idea, which is always a nice thing. For Siege, also something was spoken about, like the Siege lead is very stressful, and that's also from what I've seen in the community, a lot of the servers have like fewer and fewer top-end guilds, because in the end, just finding people to do Siege is somewhat difficult, but finding someone that actually wants to lead Siege and look at Siege the whole day is even more difficult, and it's not rewarding enough. They did already upgrade the rewards for a Siege lead. They get a little bit more of the rewards of the seasonal rewards. But they also do notice that people would start exploiting that the moment that you would make that, like, let's say you make that double or you make that way higher. Like, people would start exploiting that. People will start, like, demanding a lead role and then not actually doing lead things. So it's a very tough thing to do a balance where it's like, okay, where do we reward Siege leads enough without just like power creeping that too much, or without making things like too absurd, of making it like exploitable by people wanting to get a Siege lead position but not actually leading and that kind of stuff, and then people feeling like missing out because they don't have the lead position. So definitely a difficult thing to balance, but they're trying to just create the structure in a way where it might be less stressful for the Siege leads. But that is something that they're definitely still internally discussing. They don't really have a clear answer to what that would be, because that's also an answer. Like, for example, for me, I have no clue how you would make Siege lead less stressful. Because in the end, they have to look at the map all day. How would you take that away? Yeah, take away a whole Siege, but that's not the point, right? So I don't have the answer to that neither. And then it's also the big question, how does it work for high-end guilds and casual guilds at the same time where everyone is happy? Though some things just don't really have answers yet, but that is definitely something that is being internally discussed for them, but they don't really have an answer to it yet. And also none of us at the table had a clear answer to. World Guild Battle was also mentioned. The current thing is that there's no hard reset, there's no season, so people don't really care about World Guild Battle all too much. Their answer was to it that they didn't really think that World Guild Battle was too important to the players. They do still want to improve it alongside with Siege, but they do also notice that newer players definitely have a hard time fighting in the World Guild Battle because they simply don't have all of the units. They don't have 15 units that are ruined up working together and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just the smaller pool of people have more issues. They would like to add more support units in there, and I think support units for World Guild Battle is even more interesting than support units for Siege, which they already have added, and for RTA that they also have already added. Because in some cases, you can't really make three or like 5 different teams on the spot, but that is definitely something they're looking at. And then at the moment that they see more people enjoying that content, then maybe they can also start improving that content. So it's once again step-by-step process of doing first things first, of making it more enjoyable also for all of the casuals, and then maybe seeing like, hey, people actually do enjoy this content. Do we want to do more with it? But it's definitely something that they're looking at for maybe having ideas of also attracting new players. And now to think of it, if people can play with units they normally don't have, they might feel invested in that kind of stuff, and they might actually enjoy it more based on that. So might be an interesting one if they just add at least support units on that, and then maybe they start crafting on top of that. Then we have another topic, which was Raid R5, and that mainly came up by the Reloaded update. We're getting a lot more runes, and the grinds are really lacking behind. It is just really hard to get a legendary grind. The moment you get a legendary grind, to actually roll it in a 5 rather than a 4 for speed, for example. And yeah, it's just pretty hard to do, and therefore a lot of people are not doing it. I actually showed them, I have like tabs on my storage where I select things of 2 grind and 2 rune, or like 2 gem and 2 grind. And I showed them like I had 1884 runes in there out of my 5.3k runes that I still have to put grinds on. So that's kind of like my representation of saying like, okay, this is how much shit I still need to do in R5, but I don't want to do R5 because the drop table is kind of bad. It's just too hard to get the legendaries. You get too many drops of things that you don't really need. So their answer was the following. They are planning to modify the drop table rate. There's no exact date of when this will be. However, they don't want to make it too OP and too strong, because we were talking, for example, what on a pity system, or what if you have like multiple grinds and then you trade them in for 1 grind. So let's say I have like 5 tolerance and I trade them for 1 violent, and they were with a lot of those things, like thinking like, okay, the longevity of the game, the more we give out everything for simple and for free, the easier everyone has everything. And for the longevity of the game, that's not really a great thing. So they do want to improve things. They do notice that a lot of people are saying like, hey, R5 is not doing great. They definitely want to be improving their rates. But as they mentioned with a lot of things, they want to do it step by step. So they're going to do small baby steps towards like improving things. And it doesn't mean that in the future at some point we're not going to be able to trade in like multiple grinds for like 1 grind that we do actually care about, or something like that. But the step-by-step is first just improving the drop rate. They were talking at some point, like I suggested, what if you can select the specific grinds that you want to be focused on? Let's say that you have to make a pool of like 15, like currently there's like 25 or I don't know how many different runes, that you're selecting a subset of like 15 or 20 of those. And they were like, that sounds a little bit OP, but maybe they're going to look at how the Rift Beasts are done, where you have Rift Beasts, you have like 5 different in one thing that you can grind from that. I already said right away, it's like, yeah, but the big issue with Rift Beasts is like all of the good grinds or all of the good gems that you need are in 5 different dungeons, so I still have to farm all of them. So that doesn't really change. That's having a problem on point A, and that's replacing your problem of point A to point B. That, for me personally, doesn't change that much. But I think some people, if you really want to focus on violent runes, you don't have too many swift runes, then it does give you a bit more of a focus. So I think some people might be happy with that as well. But also, once again, that is not set in stone. The thing that is, well, not necessarily set in stone, but they're going to be looking at R5, how to improve it. And the most likely thing is what they can do on a shorter base is just improving the drop rate. But this is also something they haven't discussed yet within Korea, like the HQ themselves. So this is something that they heard from us, and they will take back to Korea and then actually discuss within themselves of saying like, okay, what is the right approach that we're going to be doing with this? So don't be expecting R5 changes right away, super instant, super fast. But it's definitely something that's going to be there at some point. There is something that is on the radar. They are looking at R5. Another thing for grinds and gems that was discussed is like, let's say that you add in a pity system. If you roll the 4 before, you can roll 5 later. They kind of want to keep it as is. That was just the simple answer on it. And mainly because of like power creeping and not giving everything too easily. And that was pretty much the main answer on all of that. They just want to keep it somewhat difficult to actually roll your 10, to roll your 5, to roll your things. They do know it can be frustrating at some times, but they also do want to keep it special if you do actually get it. In our group, it was also mentioned, what if you can put the grind first and the gem later, but you still keep your grind? Once again, they did say like, okay, that feels like pretty much too OP, because right then at that moment, everyone's going to start chasing the 23. So the 13 plus 10, whereas right now to get the 23 is really insane and really good and really difficult to do, rather than at that point, which makes things a lot easier. So once again, for power creeping reasons, they felt like, because they also did give the examples, like a lot of other games, like let's say World of Warcraft, you have level 70 gear, next patch you have level 80 gear, next patch you have level 90 gear. And with that, you are very much free to at some point give everything of the level 80 gear and get them maxed out. But in Summoners War, they're not planning to make 7-star runes, and then 8-star runes, and then 9-star runes. But they still want to keep the game running as long as possible. So the more that they give out just instantly for free and it's just simple to get, like for example, if it was relative, like if there was a pity system on the grinds, this is me speaking right now. If there was a pity system on the grinds, I would have had like 23 on most of those things at some point. It's just gonna happen. And maxing out the runes at some point, you already hit like a max cap of what a rune can be with normal runes, and there's a lot of people, especially in the higher ranks, already approaching that. And yeah, the more that people are actually like kind of finished, the more people would at some point say it's like, yeah, okay, I'm kind of done, right? So that's something that they want to prevent from happening, and for that reason, I would say that grinds and gems are one of those things. Like, sure, they do see that they want to improve the drop rate because currently it's definitely not good enough, especially with the amount of runes that we're getting through the reloaded patch. But they're doing it once again step by step rather than instantly saying like, okay, here's everything, good luck, max out everything. So that is something I would agree with. Then there were also a bunch of quality of life features and changes that people were asking for. It's mainly for attracting new players to the game. Like, how do you, the game looks old. Like, to be honest, like we can name other games. Like, I saw this skill on Honkai Star Rail the other day, and it was this big ass dragon lasering and then lasering again and then lasering 3 more times and then flying away and exploding the whole fucking galaxy. Yeah, Summoner's War doesn't really have those. I definitely would say with the skins nowadays, if we're looking at Maximilian Skill 3, and the newest skin looks insane though. But there's a lot of older skins and older models in the game. Are they gonna get any renewal of those? And they did actually mention for end of the year that they're going to be taking a few very old units, very old models, and going to be changing those to just have a better appearance. And also, they are discussing about like, okay, do we actually want to change like how the arena looks like? Do we want to change like how the island looks like? And those kind of things. Same for like UI, same with like the Steam client being in there right now. But also, they don't want to change too much to get, like, lose the feeling of Summoner's War. In the end, Summoner's War has a certain UI, it has a certain way of how things look. They also don't want to go completely out of the window with that and make it very different. Like, I can give examples, like not outside of the talk, but I can give an example on that. For example, the evolution of combat in RuneScape gave like a complete overhaul of different everything, how it looked like, how it felt like, and blah, blah, that kind of stuff. And that made everyone quit. So that is one of those things that they want to be careful with, of still keeping like the identity of Summoner's War itself. Then also for quality of life features, someone did mention, it's like, okay, we have a lot of underused runes. For example, energy, focus, guard, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. We only really care about like Swift, Vio, Despair, Will. And they did mention that they did think about like, okay, how can we maybe improve those to make those more interesting? But there's also an issue with that is currently it is relatively easy. You have to farm Vio, Swift, Will, and Despair runes. Those are the good runes. Those are the main things you want to aim for. If you make energy and focus and guard really good, then people also have to focus or like have to farm those a lot. And the game gets a lot more difficult on that. Also, a lot of people haven't been saving those runes in the past. So for that reason, they're not entirely sure if that is a right approach or a wrong approach. Because again, for the whole big player base, do you just make the game a lot more difficult and therefore just get less enjoyment of the people or not? That is definitely something they're not really sure about. However, they do admit that seal runes did not really, like, they added in a new rune because people asking for new stuff, and seal runes in the end wasn't really something that people really did pick up as like, yo, seal rune is insane, we want this. I did also mention that seal rune is in the dungeon, which people just simply don't like to farm because that dungeon is simply filled with all of the rune sets that we exactly don't want. So we don't want enhance, we don't want tolerance, we don't want accuracy, we want a little bit of fight, and then I'm probably missing like one as well. But determination, you don't need all of those runes. So seal runes by itself are definitely not bad, but they are in a dungeon that you simply just don't want to farm. So that was my feedback on that. And then we're like, okay, they didn't give a clear answer to it, but they at least acknowledged like, okay, that maybe makes sense, yeah. Then we also did talk about AI of units. For example, the Wind Harpy. Could there be a setting for like just making your PvE units always do the right thing? They didn't necessarily give like a super clear answer to it, but what kind of is stated there is that it would be way too easy and it would limit too much on potential strategizing for a team. So they don't want to give like out like the most, like let's say that you would always do the right skill, and this is me talking right now. I would Lucian every dungeon in 14 seconds. And at that moment, we start complaining about not having enough crystals. So, and I think even on a new account within half a year, if all of the units do the right skills at the right moment, I think I can do dragons in like 14 seconds or 15 seconds within like half a year. Okay, maybe not within half a year, but for, let's say, at least 20 seconds. It would be super easy. You're going to Lucian all the waves on all of the dungeons. Then you're going to get like a guaranteed armor breaker that has a multi-hit of armor break in there with like a 3 or 4 hit, like a Dark Tanjiro or whatever. And then you're going to get some insane nukes in there after an attack buff and like speed buff or whatever. It would be way too easy. And I do agree with that. I think it would be way too easy. However, it was mentioned that we do like to see more units like the Wind Harpy to remove a lot of the factor in there. It's like, oh, we don't really have a good armor breaker. And people that mentions like that is like, we don't really have a Prilia for a Dragon's team, for example. Or we don't really have a, well, to be honest, now to think about it, China more or less is. It's kind of about the same, right? But the main thing is the buff block in Steel Fortress. Steel Fortress still has like a difficult to its dungeon itself, where if you don't land the buff block, it's just gonna fill. Doesn't matter how good your teams or anything like that. But they did acknowledge that, and they're going to look into it. Once again, doesn't mean that they're gonna have like a instant answer to that, but it is something that they're going to look at. Something that I addressed myself is that there's a lot of information missing in the game, and that is information, for example, how fast is a Dragon's dungeon? How fast is, or how much HP do they have? How much defense do they have? How much resistance do they have? Where are the multipliers on skills in units? And they did say a few answers on that. For the first of all, the multipliers on skills and units, I mentioned like, yeah, I now have to ask a friend of mine that knows how to data mine the game and then put it in a third-party website to actually see all of that. First of all, they said third-party websites are cool. They're totally fine with the third-party websites to get extra information, and they're actually very happy about those third-party websites doing that. The reason that they don't put the multipliers in-game is because it might be overloading, especially new players, with too much information. Personally, for me, I think people can handle that, but that is my bias on like liking numbers, and for other people that just want to play more casual, maybe they don't want to see that much numbers. Could be true, could be wrong. Personally, I don't know, but I think doesn't really matter. But that is just something like, it's okay to disagree on something. But they did mention to add in more information in the game, maybe about the dungeons itself, if you want to like deep dive into those kind of things. They did mention that they probably want to do it, but they still really want to keep in mind like, okay, we don't want to overload people with information. So kind of makes sense, but for me, I always like the information. But maybe some other people are very different on that. Then another topic that I gave is catching up for new players. I had a few people in my chat saying like, oh, I missed the new Fever event or the booster event or whatever it was called, where we had like all of the net 5s instantly 6-starred and instantly it was skilled up and that kind of stuff. But after that event, people kind of feel like, now I can't really start the game because it doesn't really work for me. I missed out on the good things over there. And they do say that they want to add new support for new users. And they have been improving it with the Summoner's Way, and they have plans to just keep improving that time after time. However, they also do want to make it to a certain extent that people that have been doing it the old route don't feel bad about it. It's like, hey, I did this much work for that, and now new players get it just on the platter for free. I feel it's unfair. I don't like it. So they do want to keep like a fair balance in between those. I also did mention 4-star Devilmons, and the thing is, I also ask it in a way is like, you are not doing 4-star Devilmons because they know about 4-star Devilmons. It's not like they don't know. They don't do it for a reason. So I asked for the reason. And it has been an internal discussion The only thing that they're unsure about is the right balance of the supply and maybe power creeping it. And for me, that was personally a bit of a fake answer, which I'm not too sure about. I kind of can understand that people like me, I summon way more than enough. I can skill up every 4-star. I would be stacking like an infinite amount of 4-star Devilmons. I'm even stacking like a not necessarily infinite amount of 5-star Devilmons right now, but my pile is getting bigger where I'm not using that many at the moment. Also, a lot of packs nowadays give for a 5-star Devilmon, so that maybe also helps. But besides the point, 4-star Devilmons, I would probably stack an infinite amount of those. So they're more interesting for lower-end players in the first place. So for that reason, yes, makes sense. But actually, afterward, I started speaking with a few of the people that were also there. What if they put the 4-star Devilmon not necessarily in the 4-star Devilmon, but they put it in, now it's like there's a few 4-star skill ups, which is actually 4-star Devilmons, in the Summoner's Way. What if they put that in the monthly or the weekly or something like that? That could definitely be a way where you don't infinitely stack them, but it still could be a supply for them. But it has been discussed internally, but they don't really have an answer whether they're going to do it. So I probably think they're not really going to do it, but it might happen at some point. Something that also someone mentioned is that free-to-play was getting too little crystals and energy to farm with. And actually, an idea that was brought up was how about add energy for the points in Arena and Guild Shop? And surprisingly, they were like, yeah, why not? That actually makes sense. I was like, wait, what? That was one of those few small points where they were like, actually like, yeah, that makes sense. So I wouldn't be surprised if that got added on in some point. So right now for energy, and right now for arena points and guild points, we're buying scrolls. It might be in the future that you might be buying energy for that. It's of course going to be the trade of like, okay, how much is that worth? Like how much energy is a scroll worth technically? That is definitely a trade-off that's going to be looking at in the future, and that's also something that they are going to be discussing internally to get that a fair trade-off that actually makes sense. But that is something that might be interesting because in the end, if you play all of your content, like the arena, like the guild, you want to be playing more, and you don't want to be at some point being out of energy. And some people just simply don't spend that much, don't have the money to spend, and that is totally fine. They also are very happy with free-to-play always. But they do also want to kind of give it back. And this is one of those things that they were like, yeah, so we can keep people playing more without. And then, yeah, makes sense. They were actually like pretty enthusiastic about that. So that was pretty a cool thing. Then we also had a question about roadmaps. Personally, I'm all for roadmaps. We have seen it in Chronicles. They go for, like, this month we're doing this, and next month that, and Q3 we're doing this, Q4 we're doing that. What they explained is that it's sometimes difficult to explain long-time planning, especially due to changes. And that is one of the main reasons that they say they don't really want to show too much unless they already have it done. Also, in the past, there were a few miscommunications, and therefore it led to frustrations in the community. And I think that is something that happened back in the days with, I think the Dimension Hall at some point. It was mentioned like it's gonna come, and then it came a little bit too late because of like, I don't know why, but it just came like a bunch later. And people got pretty frustrated about that. And this is me talking right now, not the devs. The simple fact is, if people complain if you don't meet your deadline, you just don't set the deadline. Right? That's a way of solving things. They did also notice from this talk, however, that we did really emphasize and appreciate the honesty and like transparent talk. So because of them seeing that, it might be that they're getting like a slight different approach of saying like, hey, we get rewarded for actually showing what's going on, for being transparent, for creating the hype. But it's not something that they're going to be instantly doing like, okay, we're going to change like the whole idea of like how we work. We're going to say when things are coming later on. And then if it's wrong, we're going to say like, hey, it was not like that, back and forth and stuff like that. So maybe they just keep working as is, but they did actually see our appreciation for like being very transparent and showing like what's going on. Because in the end, I mentioned that before at the end of last year during the 10th anniversary ending, people want to stay high. People want to be, it's like, okay, this is coming, that is coming. That's why trailers are always doing so well. People have something to talk about. People have something to look forward to. And that just keeps people on the train, playing the game, enjoying the game in the community. And yeah, that's just something in there. Another point for quality of life is pity systems. And pity systems has always been like a pretty topic that a lot of people are saying like every game has that, but Summoners War doesn't have that. Well, the counter argument you can give is every other game is living for a year and Summoners War is living for 10 years. And does that maybe have something to do with the pity system? And I did mention it before. In Summoners War, people don't have everything. And if you would have a pity system, you might power creep things and you might get to the point where everyone has everything. It's something they say. And is that something that I necessarily agree with? Yes, to a certain extent. But on the full generalization, I would personally not go for a full pity system as saying like, okay, you did 250 scrolls, here's a net 5, good luck. I would rather see something like a soft pity system that it's not possible to get like 10,000 scrolls, nothing, and then you do later like 100 scrolls and you get like 15. Like that kind of imbalancing is something that I would like to see changed. But yeah, like for them, there's just a no on pity system. That is pretty much what they said. But that is for the current time. Does that mean in the future it's never going to be there? That is not the case. So yeah, in general, I would say for the longevity of the game, it's good to not have pity systems. But for me personally, still, I would like to see a little bit more in the hard unbalancing of like, some people are pulling like all the LD5s and some other people in the same amount of scrolls are pulling none. That's still something that I would like to see a little bit more balanced. But yeah, that is just something on pity system that they're pretty much saying simple hard no on pity system. They do, however, mention that the game has been running that long. So for newer players, it's pretty much hard to catch up. And they might put a limited pity system, as they call it, in place to tackle that issue that people can actually catch up a little bit better. So what that exactly means, I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't there at that day that they mentioned this one. But that could be something that they might add in something. But we're not talking about like, okay, every 286 LD scrolls, you're going to get an LD5 kind of pity system. No. There were also some question about more story and lore. And in general, the answer was like, no, they're not really focusing on that. And I wasn't there that day where this question got asked. Personally, for me, I don't think that people read too much of story and lore in these kind of games. Could be a me thing. Like, I'm definitely not sure. But that is something that they don't have right now, and I don't think they will be implementing anytime soon. What they do, however, is expanding the Sky Arena universe and the Summoners War universe through like other games. They did the comics before. They did like a short video, that kind of stuff. They're still looking at doing these kind of things to expand more lore and more story behind it. But they're probably not going to go into what some games have, that every unit has like a whole background story of where they came from, what they do, what kind of connection they have with other monsters. It will be kind of cool, but I think it's a lot of work that they rather put in something else of like actually improving the game. They also did mention at some point, it was very funny, it's like, flat stats, by the way, it's like not even us mentioning, it's like, flat stats, by the way, we keep them in there to be bad. I'm like, okay, fair, that's just a choice. It's not like they don't know, it's like, oh, flat stats are bad. No, they just want to make it difficult to get something good. And then still have the chance of like, oh, maybe you roll like a speed on it, and then you have to have like a sort of half crappy rune, but it's still good on speed and it's still something. So you have to make choices and strategical like decisions of like, do you want to use it, don't you want to use it, or just sell? And in the end, that's also what they mentioned. Like if you get a bad rune, you sell it, so you still get something. And that's also why they implemented the essences, and from the essences you can craft. Now they also implemented that you can craft a specific rune. I actually did not speak about like that the costs on that are insane. And that's also a thing. The video right now is already pretty long. And at some point, the time just also ran out to discuss about more topics, because there would definitely be a bunch more topics. I said, like, I could sit here like 3 days and still have more topics. But those are at some point also the amount of topics that were like being able to discuss. And I would say that these are pretty much also all of the topics that were discussed during these days. Definitely a few things that were mentioned is normal arena. I could definitely open a book about normal arena of what could be changed, what could not be changed. And there's definitely a few more contents which you could definitely discuss about. But these were the topics that were discussed multiple times throughout the days. They actually had like the different groups, and the different groups didn't know what the other groups had as talking points. So for that reason, they kind of wanted to find like, okay, what are the main key points that people want to talk about? Because if Group A would already say to Group B is like, hey, we're talking about this, so don't talk about it. Now, they actually wanted to have like a fair statement of different groups saying like, okay, what are the issues? And what it was, I mentioned every time was RTA, balancing, siege, a little bit of PvE things here and there, quality of life things, but R5 and R5. So those were the main things that were addressed. I hope with this video in the end, you do get a little bit more knowledge of what was spoken about. and which kind of approach that they are going to. And for some reason, I feel like that these talks that we had back there was 10 hours. And it was 10 hours of, like, it went by super fast. And then it's like, okay, what did we all speak about? Currently, I recorded for an hour and 20 minutes. I definitely have to do a lot of cutting on this thing too. But I feel like that time just goes by so fast. And I didn't even, like, right now, I feel like, what did I even speak about? There's just so many points to it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. For me personally, I think this is a really good step in the right direction of listening to the community, but maybe even more important, showing that they're listening to the community. Because we always have the thing on the top line of the balance page, like, we really listen to your feedback, blah, blah. And every time we're like, yeah, that is a copy paste, bro. You didn't listen, Jack. What? It's like that hell a copy paste right there. So for that reason, I think it's really nice to have them actually show their faces, talk to them, but also for us to get a little bit more understanding, because behind our PC, we're like, this bad, that bad, that bad, that bad. But if you're talking face to face, you always get like a little bit more of an understanding, or at least if you get like a little bit more reasoning behind things, you get like an understanding, because just hearing no is always like, why not? But if you hear no, but, and then blah, 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 reason, and then you might be like, okay, I might still disagree, but I at least understand where you're coming from. Or at some point you just got like, hey, that makes sense, I agree. So definitely a few points that I would like to say I do agree on. Also a few points that I would still say like, I see that different than some of the Korean developers. But yeah, I think in general it was a really good talk. And once again, I want to thank also everyone that was there. I also want to thank the European office for hosting this whole event and also sitting there through us with, they actually had to sit there all of the days as well, just like writing notes and organizing the chats and like getting all the stuff out there and that kind of stuff. So I definitely want to thank the European office for doing that as well. And once again, I think it's a really great step in the right direction. So once again, I'm curious to you guys as well. Let me know in the comments what you think about either all of these points, what was missed, what was good, what was bad. Let me know. And see you as always in the next one. Damn, I gotta edit a lot of stuff.
Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more guides, join the Discord and check out the content tab for the guide video archive, which contains all of the guides that you might need. Hope to see you there.